and welcome to CVI Live, Ask the Expert series with Amy Morrell today. My name is Jackie Otwell, and I'm a TVI in the Outreach Department at Maryland School for the Blind, and I'm delighted to have all of you here. I'm going to be your mentor, not your mentor, excuse me, your moderator. Let me tell you a little bit about Amy Morrell. Amy is a TVI and educational consultant for the Outreach Department at Maryland School for the Blind. She has over 16 years of experience. She's certified as a TVI, a special education, as a TVI in special education, elementary education, and deafblind, hard of hearing. She has also worked with students with multiple impairments and autism. She has first-hand knowledge of how beneficial calendar systems can be for students. So she's very excited to share her knowledge today. Just so you're aware, there's a chat feature that's down at the bottom, and you can use that today. You can press it and ask your questions if you have some now in your head that you'd like to ask. Someone has already asked me about if this is going to be displayed somewhere, and it will be on YouTube as long as we don't have any recording snafus. If you're interested, we could practice using that chat feature real quick by just doing a brief introduction of yourself. You can say where you're from, if you have any CVI students on your caseload. And to keep things flowing, I'll just read your introduction and your questions throughout. And just also so you are aware, this is being recorded. It will be available on YouTube. So if anybody wants to just take a second and use that chat feature real quick and we get an idea of where everybody's from. Thank you so much to any of you who are using the video so that Amy can see you, and as another option for talking. And of course, there's always the audio. So we have Stacy. She's new to OT department at Maryland School for the Blind. We have a parent of two visually impaired children. We have Sue Flaherty from Worcester County, Maryland. Lindsay and Michelle from Calgary, Alberta, Canada. Woo! Renee Ellis from the Outreach Department for the Texas School for the Blind. We have Mary Kay from Rochester. She's a student at the Dominican College in the TVI program with 2 classes left. Congratulations. That's exciting. Come to Maryland. I think that's all we have for our introductions. So once again, please feel free to use that chat feature. And we are so delighted to have all of you. And I'm going to let Amy go ahead and take it away.
Okay, welcome. Hello. Happy Friday or Monday. Happy Friday. Okay. Jackie, does it looking like it's supposed to?
Go up to File.
Okay, there.
And then just share it like you would be sharing a PowerPoint as a presentation.
Okay. Oh, you know what?
Do view. We have Geraldine. She's the parent of an adult with CVI and a parent mentor in the in special education at a parent mentor in special education in Clark County, Georgia. Thank you.
Okay, and Jackie asked me to do this part about calendar systems for students with cortical visual impairment. We are doing the CVI series, and I have used calendar systems a lot, and they are so wonderful for all kinds of students. It's so important for us to know and plan our days, and it's really important for students with visual impairment to plan their day. Students with cortical visual impairment especially have really difficult time navigating their day, and having it set up for them and knowing the expectations We have found really cuts down on behaviors that they may have, and it just is so nice for them to know what is expected during the day. So let's move on. Calendar or schedule systems. There's a lot of different terms that people can use for schedule systems or calendar systems. I'm also going to talk about anticipation boxes or calendar boxes, things like that. It just covers everything. Anytime that there's an anticipation that something is put there for the student, they're expected to do something. That's what I'm going to go into. They just create access by linking symbols to events, and the symbol can be an object, it can be a word, it can be a picture, whatever has meaning for that student. It builds both symbol understanding and anticipation of what will happen next.
May I have your attention, please?
Sorry.
This is a reminder that there is soccer practice today after school.
It also creates an understanding of what is going to happen first, now, next, and what has happened in the past and what is finished. It fosters the sequencing of first, next, after, and it leads right into literacy, which I think is so important when we look at calendar systems. This is a lot of times the first time a student is using literacy in school or in their home. Children with typical vision can access all information in their environment, and they can see and anticipate what's going to happen. But it's really our job to set that up for the students who have a visual impairment. Students with vision, they may see their mom getting their coat, putting her coat on, and they just know that she's going to be going out. They see the teacher organizing music supplies, and they understand that music will happen soon. Depending on the CVI phase that the student is in, they will have limited visual understanding or limited distance and understanding of what's going to happen. A lot of times, these students with CVI, life seems so random to them as things change throughout their day. So the setup and visual access of the calendar system, it really is important that it matches the child's CVI range score. So going into that, you can take a look at the cortical visual impairment and approach to assessment and intervention by Christine Roman-Lancy. So let's move into how you would choose an object for a calendar system. So before setting up a calendar system for a student, it's important to do a functional vision assessment, including a CVI assessment, to determine what phase the student is functioning in. From there, you could use the assessment to make decisions about what to include in their calendar system. Another important thing to look at is the communication matrix. And completing a communication matrix is also really helpful to know exactly where the student is with their communication system. It's essential that the objects be meaningful for the child, that they are easily replaceable or easily recreated, just in case something happens to it. It's important to consider the whole child when making decisions about what to use when creating a schedule system, information about the student's physical abilities, and ability to access a calendar system, as well as their visual abilities, is really important. And depending on where a child falls on the CVI range, it'll determine the type of objects or visual information that's used to represent the activities. For example, a Matchbox car doesn't really have anything to do with a child's experience of riding to and from school. A more appropriate object for this type of student would be a harness that they wear in the car. Objects and routine activities should be agreed upon by the members of the team. So all of the team members that work with the students. So it may be the OT, the PT, the O&M instructor. It may be the teacher who works with the student. It may be the TVI. Whoever, and also, of course, the family. it's important to include everyone in these decisions. And this will help ensure that greater consistency across all settings. And it's important that the student has a calendar system not only at school, but also at home too.
Amy, can I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
For the communication matrix, do you happen to have a link handy for that? Or is that something I can just add when I post it to
you can add that on, and you can just do a search on that. I don't know how many different counties use it, but we have had extensive training at our school with, you know, how important the communication matrix is. And I think that when you get together with the whole team and work on that with the team as a team approach, you can really get, you know, an insight as to where the student is with their communication, and you know, and how they're moving along with, you know, as they improve with their communication, as it changes. And it just really helps with the consistency of the approach whenever anyone is working with a student, to make sure that they're all using the same communication objects, the same type of communication, whether it be sign language or spoken voice, and how expressively the student is responding.
Well, I got a website. I just posted in the chat. Someone had said communicationmatrix.org.
Thank you. Okay, let's go on to how the calendar system is used. It's important that enough time be built into the child's day to be able to check their calendar system before each activity. So typically the child and the teacher go to the accessible location where the calendar system is stored. They find the first object on the left. And it's important, as I said earlier, you know, that a lot of times this is the child's first literacy experience, having a calendar system. So it's important for kids to start on the left and move over to the right, just as we read. It's important to go top to bottom. So, you know, you're going across. Sometimes calendar systems are set up so that they're top to bottom, listed that way. So the teacher and the student would go to the accessible location, find the first object on the left, identify what it is, its significance, using whatever appropriate language would be appropriate for that student. I'm going to give you an example. You might pick up a paintbrush on the left and say, paintbrush. Today is the day for art in the art room. The student and the teacher would carry the item to the place where the activity will occur and continue to touch and look at the paintbrush and discuss the art activity that they will work on. At the beginning, it's really important for that object to be used in the activity. It just gives it meaning, the student much more understanding of how important it is and how it represents that activity. In this way, the paintbrush begins to take on meaning and represent the activity itself. Similarly, a cup, a spoon, diaper, book, a switch for a computer can represent activities that they represent. Once the activity has been completed, the student and teacher carry the object back to the calendar system and place it in a special finish box to the right of the other boxes and say finished, signifying the activity is over. Then they take the next object out of the next box and repeat the same process. And when I say box, it can be however the schedule system is set up. And I have some pictures of, when we get into it a little bit more, different schedule systems, and you can see how they're set up. It's also important to make sure that there's processing time for the student and you're not rushing them through. And also using a hand under hand approach. The student needs some support instead of a hand over hand approach, so that the student is using your hand to help pick up whatever it is. You can kind of guide them instead of controlling their hand. As students begin to associate the objects with these certain activities, they can begin to use the same object to refer to the activities, either to request the activities or discuss them afterwards. So this also leads into literacy, which I was talking about earlier. So really using a calendar system, it opens the door for the students to be able to use these objects or pictures, whatever they may be, to make choices. You know, what you want them to do is, and eventually to make choices. Do you want to do this activity or this activity? So once these objects have meaning, then you can start working into that. Now that we know how a calendar system works, let's take a look at the visual behaviors that Dr. Gordon Dutton has identified with CVI, just to give you an idea. So he looks at CVI using these identified visual behaviors. So the visual field impairment on one or both sides, impaired perception of movement, difficulty handling the complexity of the visual scene, impairment of visually guided movement, upper and lower limbs, impaired visual attention, behavior difficulties associated with crowded environments, and also difficulty recognizing what is seen. So I think it's important to take a look at, you know, how different people look at visual behaviors with CVI. And then we have Dr. Roman Lancey, her 10 characteristics that use the CVI range to assess children. The visual skills are measured on a continuum from 1 to 10 around each of the characteristics. Now, these characteristics should be considered when choosing whatever representations you're going to use for daily activities when you have a schedule system. Color, movement, latency, visual fields, complexity, light gazing, distance viewing, visual reflexive responses, visual novelty, and also visual motor. And let's take a look at phase 1. In phase 1, we're just building visual behaviors, getting the child to look. So we're going to take a look and choose something that is the student's favorite color. And what you're going to do is something that it's going to be like a one colored item, and that's covering color. The child may look at movement or shiny objects, but they might not seem interested in stable objects. You know, that's looking at movement. There may be little or no reaction to visual threat or touch between the eyes. The child may fixate or briefly, but likes light, ceiling fans, movement. The student may see things in their peripheral field, but may not react to things in their central vision. There may be a near space that their visual attention is in. Within 2 feet, the student may not look at faces, that's looking at complexity. They may see best in an uncluttered, quiet place. They may only want to look at familiar or favorite toys. And also there might be a long delay before they turn to look, looking at latency. A student in phase 1, they may use a type of calendar system called an anticipation box. And this just gives this child information about what will happen in their day. So using real objects from their daily routine, each object would represent an activity. And the anticipation box would have a black background, be very simple, and have one object in it. That is the student's favorite color to represent each routine activity. And you're going to talk about that object and pay close attention to the salient features, and always talk about the salient features of that object. So this is a cup that the student uses during meal times. A student who visually functions at the beginning of phase 1, they're just starting to use their vision, so they may not be able to recognize something like this, but it's important to use it and keep repeating exposure to it. and that it's the student's preferred color. Incorporate this into all of the objects that they have during the day. Moving on to phase 2. Now these objects can have 2 to 3 colors, but the student still has a favorite color. They can look at patterns. Light doesn't always distract them. They may take a while to look, but mostly only when they are sick or tired. Looking at movement, they still need items to move to draw their visual attention. Some noise is tolerated in the room, and the student is blinking when you touch them between the eyes. Sometimes there's a blink to threat. The student can see things a little bit farther away now, 4 to 6 feet. They can look at faces if the person is not talking, which is complexity. They can look and reach to a familiar object. They can look at simple pictures and can also look at musical toys, which also looks at complexity. So as students become a little bit more familiar with the basic setup, they can move up and they move up the CVI range. They may be able to use slightly more abstract systems that are arranged in a left to right sequence. But with partial or objects or tactile symbols, they may be able to do that as well. It may also be desirable to design a more portable system so that they can use it throughout the day. Now this system, I just wanted to show it to you how it's set up. I like the black background. It's nice having the student's name there, and you can see that it's brailled. It looks like it's a little bit reflective, a little bit shiny because it's been laminated, so that might not be the best approach for this student, but I do like that there's a visual tag on the student's name tag. Now, this student would probably be towards the end of phase 2 because look at how complex the background is. We have 4 different items. The student, it might be a lot easier for them at the beginning to just place one item at a time on the board. And then you can just add another item as they become more familiar. So they have, and you can see how this is just objects that they would use during the day that would represent some activities that they're doing. And let's see, let's go on to the next one. Here's another one. Here's another example. This is also, you notice left to right, using some of the baskets. Some of these are very difficult for the student to see. You can see the red bag and the red basket. You might want to use a different basket so that the student, there's more contrast. And the white, with the white, if that's, I wasn't sure if that was a napkin or if it was a diaper or if that was something that they clean with. So just, this is just reinforcing that, you know, there's a lot of different ways to set up these schedule systems. And as you're setting it up, you have to decide, you know, how many things at a time is a student going to be able to handle. At the beginning, probably just one thing at a time until they become more familiar with their schedule and more familiar with the objects that represent their schedule. It's a lot of reinforcement and a lot of time that's going to be taken to get them all set up and comfortable with their schedule systems. Now, this isn't a great picture, but this is a CVI assessment was done for this child, and it indicated that the student's able to look at 7 items at a time, which looks at complexity of our array. The CVI range indicated that the child is not able really to understand 2D pictures or images, so this teacher chose 3D embedded symbols. The CVI range indicated that the child could look at all colors, so many colors are used, looking at the color characteristic. The child can look at these symbols without movement, so the symbols can be presented in a stable fashion. The calendar system's consistent use throughout the day will build familiarity And light can be controlled using this. The calendar system can be presented in the student's best visual field. The calendar system can be presented as long as needed for the student, the child, to look and reach. And the calendar system can be presented at optimal distance, determined by the assessment. The teacher chose items to represent each activity, and each symbol is within the child's tactile, visual, or auditory experience. So they have a ball for the gym, a paintbrush for art, a spoon for lunch, and a book for reading, and a bell for music. Now, how can a student move on once the basic system has been mastered? As the child becomes more familiar with this basic setup and they move up on the CVA range, they may begin to use slightly more abstract systems, which are still arranged in the left to right sequence, but with partial objects or tactile symbols. It may also be desirable to design a more portable system for ease throughout the day. And in phase 3, the goal is resolving the characteristics. The child is looking at all kinds of items, familiar and unfamiliar, colorful or not. They can tolerate most kinds of sensory input, maintain visual gaze. Blink and touch reflexes response are always present. The child doesn't take extended time to look, and the student now looks beyond 10 to 20 feet for moving items. Distance is often one of the last areas to resolve. The child looks at near items that are not moving and smiles at familiar and unfamiliar faces. Facial recognition is often one of the last areas to resolve as well. The child's looking at themselves in a mirror. Real eye-to-eye contact is not just looking at the reflective light or the movement in the mirror. The student will look at pages in a book or pictures, really looking at the pages, not just enjoying the movement of turning the page. The student's imitating the visual action. The child sees a visual item and understands its implications. It sees that someone is getting their coat, looks for theirs, sees someone's approaching with arms outstretched and puts their arms up to be picked up. They're seeing a group of parents and sorts out their parent from the others visually with no voice cues. Smiles up to their favorite people, not at strangers. Facial recognition is also one of the last areas to resolve. And the child is now seeing in all visual fields. The student is looking up and reaching to items to play when looking. And here's an example.
Amy, can I interrupt you real quick? Someone had asked a question. Sure. They had asked that you had mentioned initially using an object that the student will be using in a particular activity, for example, the paintbrush. That makes sense. So is it okay for the objects to change based on the activity, or should the object remain the same? I have always thought the object should be consistent.
It should be consistent at the beginning, because that object is giving the information that they're going to that specific activity. So sometimes what will, and if it's a different activity that you're going to use during the the gym time or the art time, then that's fine. But maybe if they're going to do something, maybe it's worked into their routine that when you go in, maybe they use the paintbrush to I don't know, paint across the paper one time. And maybe that's something that's consistent. I know with our music therapy teacher, all of the students, they use the same object. They use like a little shaker, and all of the students bring their shaker to music class, and that's part of the routine of the music therapy class. They have a basket and they say, they sing a song and they ask the student to shake their shaker, and everyone puts their shaker into the basket as a way to say hello, and then they repeat the same activity when they're leaving. So they're actually using that shaker briefly at the beginning and at the end of the activity. But you can make it up. You can say, okay, you know, every time when we go to art class, you're going to take that paintbrush and, I don't know, go across your hand or go across the table, or you can actually paint with it. You know, maybe they don't want it, you don't want to get it dirty. Maybe you can just get it wet. They can dip it in water and use it. But I think it's really important to have it be something consistent. And then as they develop a little bit more, it can change. You know, you can say, you know, yesterday you're so good with using this paintbrush. You know, there's going to be some other things that we're going to be using. Maybe we're going to add the paintbrush, and now we're going to add the word paintbrush onto the paintbrush. So kind of adding on to it. But I do think it is consistent. It's important for it to be consistent. And you can see with this schedule system, this, you know, when a child reaches phase 3, they'll have a basic grasp of the activities and understand the meaning of the symbols. And then they can use more abstract symbols. And these are very abstract picture symbols with written labels. Again, the symbols are arranged in left to right, top to bottom sequence, just as print and braille symbols are arranged. And with this system, the student has developed a clear understanding of the symbols. The print and the symbols can be separated, and the student can begin to match the sight words of their schedules with the pictures. So that's another activity that's important, and you can see we're building literacy. You can use some of these pictures and words to write a sentence or write a phrase. And let's go into the next one. And how is it related to literacy? Students read their schedule to gain information about their day. Anticipating activities about their day tends to decrease anxiety and helps with self-control. And a schedule system allows students to make choices about their daily activities and allows them to have a say about their day. Eventually, what you want is you want the student to know, okay, today is Monday, and you want the student to be able to set up their own schedule system, whether it be objects or pictures or written words. And you know, you can go from the day, you can start with, let's just do 2 activities, then you can move on to 3. The morning, let's do, you know, the morning and then lunch, and keep adding and adding and adding. Some students are going to be able to get to the point where they can set up their whole week. And some students, they're able to set up the whole month. So it's just, you know, it's like we have our schedule book. It keeps us on task, and we know exactly what's going to happen every day. And then it lets us set up our day. It's the same thing for students as well. Another thing that I didn't talk about that I wanted to talk about is schedule systems that also are set up in during activities. I wouldn't really call it a schedule system, but it's something that's important to talk about, and it's more of a task sequence where you have something that the student is going to do, an activity. Maybe they're going to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, but it's nice for them to be able to have some independence while they're doing this. So maybe you're going to have a task calendar system type setup where they're going to have, you know, something that represents first thing you're going to do is you're going to get out the bread. The second thing you're going to do is to get out your spoon, and, you know, the peanut butter, the jelly, and then what you're going to do. It's more of a task analysis than it is anything else, but it's a system that you would set up, and it makes the student a lot more independent in activities, and it gives them, you know, the control over the activity. I think really what we're trying to do is we're trying to set kids up for success, and we're really trying to make sure that the kids can be as independent as possible. as independent as they possibly can be, and move through so that they are able to feel comfortable with their day. And then there's a lot of resources that we have for literacy with students with CVI, and also with calendar systems as well. So creating books, identifying salient features, guidelines, implications for CVI and literacy, and modifying books as well. And all of these things I find kind of go together with the schedule systems that we have and the calendar systems that we have for students. So that is about all that I have to go over. If you guys have any questions, please ask.
You can feel free to use the chat feature to do that. And then if you type your question, I'll read it. And then if you want to have some dialogue with Amy so you can elaborate, you have the opportunity to do so. Give everybody a minute.
How do we get those resources? Oh, I thought she said it was her. She didn't.
Okay, I do have a question. We have been struggling to come up with an object for work with teacher for students who have no use of their hands. Any suggestions?
Okay, how are they working with the teacher? What are they using? Is it something, are they working only with that one teacher, or are they using any equipment when they work with the teacher? A lot of times you can have the equipment. Sometimes if it's a special teacher, a lot of times our speech pathologists, they wear a scrunchie on their hand, and when they're working with the student, they transfer the scrunchie from their arm to the student's arm. And when that student is finished with speech, they put it back on the speech teacher's arm. And I think that's just a nice way of, you know, I'm working with you and now we're finished, and you know, you're going to put it back on me and I'm going to go work with another student. But you can also use whatever it is that, however it is that you're working with that student. If they are working with paper, you can have paper. If you use let's see, if they're using I don't know, if they're using some type of texture when you're working with them, maybe you're working with them on an all-in-one board and it's a black background. Maybe you can use that, or a symbol that maybe is introduced at the beginning of every time that you're working with them. That can also be used. Does that answer your question, or does that help?
All right, I guess we're okay. Somebody had asked if the resources for literacy from you, and how can we access them? I will be putting this PowerPoint and this video up on Maryland School for the Blind's YouTube page in a couple days. So if you want to check that out, you can find it there. And then someone had requested that you talk more about how you work with the student to identify salient features.
Okay. So, for instance, if you're going to talk about, let's see, if you're going to talk about eating, for instance, and the student is going to use a spoon as a representation for eating, then you're going to talk about, you know, what makes a spoon a spoon. You know, it has the curved edge, and have them touch it, and it has a little scoop on the inside, and it has a handle, and then start introducing some other different types of spoons. Now, this is also a spoon that's made of, spoon is made of metal. You can see that this spoon is a different color, and it's made of plastic. And, you know, comparing, and maybe what you can do is you can have them use the spoon to scoop something and then use the other spoon. So that they're comparing the spoons, they're still used for the same thing, but they feel a little bit different. They look a little bit different. And then as they're understanding that those are the same, start trying to get them generalizing a little bit more and adding a little bit more. But I think it's really important to always talk to the students about what makes that object that object. What makes a chair a chair? You know, it has legs, it has arms, you can sit in it, and just compare the different objects with the student, because a lot of times they're not making those connections, and they're not generalizing. They're thinking, okay, now this is a chair, but they're, you know, not generalizing it to another chair. This is a chair in my classroom, but, you know, that over there is not a chair in another classroom. It's only here. So it's really important to talk about that and compare what are the salient features that makes that object that object.
And then the resources you posted, are they books, articles, or both?
They're articles. Those
Thank
are
you.
articles that I just found when I was, you know, taking a look for resources on CVI and also, you know, schedule systems as well. And the Perkins Path to Literacy, I think that's what it's called. It is excellent. It has so many fantastic ideas of ways to modify things. And I just, you know, whenever they come out with a different article about something, it's usually so relevant to what I'm doing with the kids.
Ellen Maisel does a lot of work with the CVI part of the Path to Literacy, and she's going to be one of our experts in the spring.
That'll be fantastic. Yeah, she's great. I've read a lot of her articles. Does anyone want to share any of their experiences setting up calendar systems for students with CVI, or difficulties that they've had? I think probably the most frustrating thing for me is when I go into a classroom and they don't have a calendar system set up, and you introduce it, you explain how to do it, and it's just not being used. It's so important for the kids. And I find that it's, you know, I would be lost without my calendar every day. It just tells me exactly what I'm supposed to do and when I'm supposed to do it. And it's the same thing for the kids. They are able to do so many more things independently when they have their schedule system, because they know what the expectations are, and they're also, their behaviors, they're able to have that self-control, which I think is so important sometimes for students. They have a lot of problems, and it helps the adults kind of step back, which can be difficult sometimes. Adults want to help and help and help, and we want the kids to be as independent as possible.
Well, Amy, that was really powerful to kind of put it back in perspective for us, as we would be lost without our calendars. And then, then think about our students. That was a great point. That really put things into perspective.
Yeah, we see, going into schools, we go into a lot of different classes, and we see a lot of kids that are being led around by well-meaning adults. And, I want to see the kids lead. We should kind of be following their lead. Any other questions, comments? Or anyone want to share anything about, a schedule system that you set up? These are just a few schedule systems that we've had. There's sometimes I find that people think that the schedule system is fantastic. It's really pretty. It looks so nice, but it's not accessible for the student, or it's not, it's really just for the adult to kind of like show off. I've seen schedule systems where they think the schedule system is fantastic, and it's in those colorful drawers that are descending, and the drawers are fantastic. They're so pretty. I love them. They look so nice, but it doesn't give the kids access at all. You know, it's just colors to them, and they may not even see the different colors. I've also seen schedule systems up on walls that the students have no access to. It's more of a schedule system for the adults to know what the student is going to be doing, instead of for the student to have access to the schedule system. So I think, you know, we really have to know that the focus needs to be on the student, and we need to give them all of the tools that they need to be successful.
And Amy, would you say that it's a process too, from my experiences? Like, you might do it one way first and realize this isn't working. And so it's kind of something that it's okay to fail at, or not fail, but maybe go, oh, I tried it with these trays and these trays did not work. I need to have another type of system, another way to do it. That it is a trials. And would you say that?
I think so, but I think that if you know, you really look at where the student is on the CVI range, and you look at the important things that are important to them, color, you know, things that they enjoy, some of their favorite objects, things like that, then there's less chance that you're going to have to modify the system. But of course, I mean, you know, kids are different. A lot of times we think, okay, they're going to love this. This is going to work. This is going to be fantastic. And how often does it happen that it just doesn't work? And we have to start at square one and redo things. Or maybe, you know, we're thinking that this really is one of their favorite things, and, you know, is very meaningful in this activity. And it turns out that the activity is different and we have to change it around. So, you know, that's a good point. You know, and you also have to take a look at the activity. You know, you really have to know what the activity is so that you can find something that fits that activity that they're going to be using for their schedule system.
All right, does anybody else, it's 10:04, so we still have a few more minutes, but does anybody else have any questions, comments, thoughts, tips, advice that they could give?
Yeah, I mean, I was asked to be the expert, but I am no expert. I've just seen a lot of kids with CVI and a lot of kids with calendar systems, and I've seen firsthand how they work.
All right, well, I'm not seeing anything, so I want to thank everyone for participating today. In a few days, this video will be posted to Maryland School for the Blind's YouTube page, as well as a link to this PowerPoint. On October 28th, Sharon Whited from Maryland School for the Blind, our low vision specialist, she's going to be talking about adapting books for CVI. And November, I don't remember the date, but you'll see a flyer. November, we will be featuring Sandy Newcomb, and she is going to be talking about assessment. So we hope to see all of you again for CVI Live, and thank you so much for your time, and thank you, Amy Morrell, for presenting for us.
Sure thing. Bye, guys. Thanks for participating.
You have to look it up now. I was trying to get it on the
Mary Kay, I saw what you said, and it'll be easier for me to say it. If you look at, usually Perkins will put them out on their Path to Literacy newsletter.
Okay.
So you should see them then. But what's your email address, and I can also email it to you.
Do you want me to type it in there?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Hang on. One second.
Oh, no, it's fine.
I have notifications that keep coming up while I'm trying to type this in. Oh,
Friend of force. Okay, friend of.
yeah. So you'll know that's me. Oh, you see it, kind of. Okay. Friends, yeah. Friends of 4s@gmail.com. I haven't used my Dominican one for stuff like this. Just
Okay.
'cause I don't know why.
Okay, great. I can
Thank you so much.
actually I can email you the whole list of what we're doing for the rest of the year.
Yes, that would be great. I didn't even do this because I need like hours. My hours are all done. Everything's all done. I just need more. I might be doing somebody's maternity leave. And
Oh, wow.
so she's got a plethora of different kind of kids. Even though I'm
Okay.
still getting my cert, they'll kind of help me through it. So it's
Super.
good.
That's excellent. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I'm glad you found this beneficial.
I know. So nice to meet you.
Yes, nice to meet you as well. Take care, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.